Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about archery, and specifically we're going to be talking about a technologically advanced version of arrows that were made in a limited way. So we got to get into this. Now first of all, we got to understand that people in the past had to hunt to survive. There was no agriculture originally, and if you go back far enough, the weapon of choice was the atlatl. Now, don't call this a spear thrower. I know the textbooks call this a spear thrower because they think you're stupid. You're not. You're highly intelligent. You can learn a new word. An atlatl throws what looks like an arrow, but is about 5 or 6 feet long, called a dart. So the atlatl launches a dart. This is a powerful weapon, and this was what we used as people all over the world to hunt the Ice Age giants. Things like woolly mammoths and extinct giant camels and mastodons, things like that. This was the weapon of choice for hunting and for self-defense. Every country of the world had its own version, but this was the way. Now eventually, as people shifted away from hunting the big animals, and a lot of the big animals started to go extinct, they were hunting medium to small animals, and that's where the bow and arrow comes in. Now this is a juniper wood bow that I made, and it's pretty big. It's about 5 feet long. Normally these are a bit smaller. This is one that I'm working on right now. The bow and arrow shoots, obviously a bow shoots an arrow. Now an arrow is something that is much harder to make than an atlatl dart, okay? The shaft needs to really be quite straight, and there were even arrow straighteners that were used to heat and bend and straighten these arrows. Now I made these arrows. Arrows are hard to make. Now typically you would have an arrow made out of a solid piece of wood. This is a cedar arrow. This is what the tribes in the Pacific Northwest used. And if you're going to do a wooden arrow today, cedar is usually what people use. The best feathers for fletching are turkey feathers, even today. And this is called the knock in back. This is where the bowstring goes, right there. Now I've carved this directly into the arrow shaft. In today's modern arrows, there's a separately made plastic knock that you will glue onto the end of your arrow. It's very convenient instead of carving that in and hoping that doesn't split. All right. Now you can see the arrow, the fletching has to be glued on. These feathers, these fletching are glued on, and they're also wrapped at the tip and at the end. Now in this case, I have a modern target arrow tip on this particular arrow. Well, in my area, in most of the Southwest, they didn't have cedar. And so arrows were made out of either rose, wild rose. The nice thing about wild rose is you can cut it, and the same day you could cut it, you can make a functioning arrow. Most other woods you have to cut and dry it out. So this is the most commonly used wood in the area. This is a dogwood arrow. Now dogwood, as you can see, it bends, and so you have to keep heating it over a fire and re-straighten it. So you have to keep maintaining your arrows. It's a lot of work. Dogwood is an incredible wood. It's red on the outside. Harvesting it in the summer is the best, and it functions very well. It's very pliable, but it becomes very stiff. It's a lightweight wood that's very strong, has a lot of structural integrity. But even with that, the lighter weight your arrow is, the more powerful it will be. So what you really want is you want the weight up front, and you want the force delivered in back. So you're pushing forward, and it's almost like they're a line of kids waiting to go into lunch, and here's this kid up here that's stopping the line, and everybody's pushing and back, pushing, and that's stored spring energy that is pushing forward. So you want all your weight up front, and if you have like a stone arrowhead, then you do. But again, you want to reduce the weight. You want the arrow to be as lightweight as possible so that the energy that you are putting into the arrow will transfer over to whatever you are shooting. Otherwise, the heavier it is, you have resistance from gravity, and you're not going to have as powerful as an arrow, regardless of how strong your bow is. And that is where this video comes into. We are going to look at some artifacts. So we have to understand just how some very, very special arrows were made. But first of all, you have to understand hafting. So when you have any sort of a projectile point, like here's a Clovis point, and you can see that it is wedged in like that, okay? Now, if you go to a gift shop today and you buy a modern day arrow made for the tourist trade, then what they do is they just split a piece of wood and they just wedge an arrowhead in it, and they just tie it up. This is not a good hunting arrow, because you've effectively made a wedge. And if you've ever split wood, you understand that a wedge, that the second that arrow hits something, it's going to split the arrow. And the arrow is going to absorb the energy instead of the animal you are trying to hunt. So this is bogus, this is bunk. If you see arrows like this, they're not real. A real arrow must be hafted in a very special way. So first of all, the arrow maker will drill into it. They got their arrow shaft harvested, dried out, stretched out, straightened, and then you drill a hole. And you do that with a stone drill or with a bow and drill. You drill a hole and then you carve outward. You carve a U-shaped trough. Then once you carve that U-shaped trough, you carve the ends in. And then when you put your arrowhead in or your spearhead in, you glue it. And you glue it with one of three kinds of glues. You either use pine pitch glue, which is pine tree sap mixed with charcoal from a fire. If you look at my videos, I got a video on how to make pine pitch glue. Or you could use hide glue, which is granulized rawhide brought to almost a boil, and it's one of the best glues on the planet. Or asphalt, natural asphalt that bubbles up from the earth. You take that, you heat it up, blah, 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 bubbles in, glue it in. So you glue it and you tie it. You can either just glue it or you can glue it and tie it, but you never just tie it. If you see an arrowhead or a spearhead or an atlatl dart point that is tied on and nothing else, that would not actually work, okay? So you have, this is hafting. So normally on arrows like this, right, you've got your nock carved in, and you would have your arrowhead hafted in to a solid shaft. Well, somewhere along the way, some of our southwestern tribes realized, you know what, a lighter weight arrow is a lot faster and can deliver more deadly power. And they came up with a great idea. They would take reeds, hollow reeds, which seems kind of delicate, and they are. They would oil them with animal fat, and those reeds absorbing the animal fat would retain more structural integrity. And then they would make a foreshaft and an aftershaft. Now, they would make these out of dogwood. And again, remember, dogwood is a very, very available wood. So you carve it, and you attach your arrowhead to this foreshaft, and then you wedge it in to the front of this hollow arrow. And you got to glue it, and you can lash around the outside to tighten it, and then you have a much shorter nock after shaft that you wedge into the back, and you glue it and tie it in, and then you fletch the arrow. So what you have is a multiple part weapon. This is so much different than just like a spear. So what happens is eventually this arrow is going to be much faster, much more powerful, but it's likely that the arrow is going to break. If it breaks, you just pull out the foreshaft, pull out the aftershaft, and you have a stockpile of reeds that you have harvested, and you put them in new reeds, re-glue them, and you're ready to go. So you keep reusing this foreshaft and this aftershaft again and again and again. It's a brilliant idea. Now, we actually see these at many archaeological sites. We see stockpiles of reeds that are arrow lengths. You know, they're this long, and they're just a stack of hollow reeds that have been, the little buds on each side have been gently sanded down, and they are oiled with animal fat, and they're just stockpiled, ready. So hey, if your arrow breaks, get another one, repair your arrow. It's an ingenious idea. We see this Danger Cave in Utah is one of the famous sites that goes back a long ways, that we have these stockpiles of these arrow shafts made out of hollow reeds. Now, in today's world, the archery we have, so I grew up doing archery. I grew up as a kid doing archery. I learned archery, and I used cedar arrows. Still my favorite to use. I absolutely love cedar arrows. They're the best. They're just something wholesome about them. You know, turkey feathers and cedar, it's a winning match. But then people started doing aluminum arrows. So then modern archers realized, yeah, you know, having a hollow arrow makes for a faster arrow. So we started doing aluminum arrows. And now today we've switched all the way that we have carbon fiber arrows that are narrower and they're lighter weight than anything. They're incredibly lightweight. But again, all that weight is up front with the modern arrowhead. So we have taken the same idea of the hollow arrow that Western tribes used, And we've taken the same idea with modern archery. But here's the really strange thing. At the Hutchings Museum, there is an incredible artifact. So we have a foreshaft that is, normal, like you would expect, and you have to know where to look because, you can see that the fletching has disintegrated. But if you know where the line is, you can see where that aftershaft is sticking out from the arrow. But we also have something very different where somebody has made an aftershaft that plugs all the way down in to where it's even with the end of the reed arrow shaft. So again, I'm showing this, and you're looking at it in the red. The red, what you're looking at is the aftershaft, but again, it's made flush with the arrow shaft itself. This is ingenious. This is a wild idea, and it's a really good idea. I would have had to have been glued. You would still take some hide glue to wedge it in so that it didn't wedge in any further. But this is incredible, and I have never seen this at any other museum ever, anywhere. Not that it couldn't be, but this was a cutting-edge idea. So what we see is that ancient peoples, we kind of think of, oh, this is the way. They did this. They hunted with a bow and arrow. It's like, yeah, but bow and arrow technology evolved. They went from a self bow, which is just a carved piece of wood, to then recurves, to then using sinew-backed bows where you glue animal sinews on the front to give it more strength. And then the arrow technology kept changing as well too, where you went from solid arrows to lighter weight arrows to hollow arrows to arrows with after shafts that were plugged in all the way to the same distance as the arrow shaft itself. It's really incredible. You got to come and see these. Come to the Hutchings Museum, take a look at these artifacts because they're on display, and without this understanding, people don't realize how rare and how unique and how special it is. This was cutting-edge advanced technology. Having the advantage, and I've made hollow arrows, the same technique. I don't have any. I'm going to do that this summer. I'm going to make some and show this whole process because I haven't done it in years. And they break. They'll last, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, and then eventually they're going to break. And then take out the foreshaft and aftershaft, put a new reed in, and you're set to go. It's an incredible technology, and it's very forward thinking. So if you enjoyed this, I would love to hear your comments and your thoughts on this. And I welcome you to come to the Hutchings Museum and see these artifacts in person. And if you haven't already, if you could hit subscribe to the channel, I very much appreciate it. And always remember that life is a gift. So never stop learning and never stop exploring. We'll see you next time.